Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Tell Matt Show. As always, we are your hosts. Over here, we have the lovely Kirsha Fox, author of the newly released Son of Deception. Beautiful cover. Homeschool mom of four and avid gamer.
And this is my co host, Julia J.K. Allen. She is an editor, author, and author coach. She writes fantasy and horror, and she loves to put magic in everything. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, and we're so
Yay.
excited to welcome our guest.
Yes,
About him?
our guest today is Wayne Turmel. He is a former stand-up comic, car salesman, and business consultant who lives and writes in Las Vegas. He's the author of 15 books, including nonfiction on business and workplace communication. He also writes fiction to save what's left of his sanity. His novels include 3 historical fiction books as well as urban fantasy, a werewolf PI series. The second in that series, Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker, came out just this December 8th. He lives with his wife, the Duchess, and Mad Max, the defender of the realm and most manly of poodles.
Yes. Welcome. We're so excited to have you on.
You need to lower the bar for excitement, but I'm glad to be here.
Oh, yeah. And it's quite the epic little bio you have there as well.
It's so weird listening to that. But here's the thing. If you get old enough, there's a lot of stuff that's happened.
Right. 15 books is quite an accomplishment, though. So I love that for you.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about your writing journey? What got you started?
Well, oh, good heavens. I've written basically all my life. I mean, right out of high school, I started doing stand-up comedy and did it for 18 years or something ridiculous. That's what brought me from Canada to the US. And then, towards the end of my stand-up career, I was like, well, maybe I should get into screenwriting and TV writing. And so I transitioned to that. And I had a couple of screenplays optioned. Nothing ever got made. And then the wife and child insisted on eating. And so had to get a big boy job and joined the real world. And continued. I wrote articles and things like that having to do with my work, and got invited to contribute chapters. And then I started writing my own books. And so between about 18 and 50, I mean, all I did was write. And then when I turned 50, I got it in my head that despite everything that I had done, I'd never be a real writer until I did a novel. And that's where my first historical fiction novel, Count of the Sahara, came from. And meanwhile, I'm still writing business books. We have a couple of bestsellers out. My new one that I co-wrote with my boss, The Long Distance Team, is out the end of February. So, I'm kind of alternating between being a grown-up and then writing my novels and short stories and silliness. So it's been a long journey, if that's...
Oh, that sounds so fun, though, to be able to do the fun stuff, the stuff that you find engaging, and then also the business side of stuff.
Well, it keeps a roof over my head and then also keeps me, off the street and out of trouble. And honestly, the fiction writing has become sort of the center of my social life. Most of the people I hang with online and in real life are writers. And when we first moved to Las Vegas, we didn't know anybody. So the writing community was kind of the first group of friends that we made when we were here.
Yes. I totally understand that because that has become my reality as well. All of my best friends now are also authors.
Yeah, there's this notion that writing is a lonely business, and I don't buy that. I think typing is lonely. Writing is social.
Right. Well, that's wonderful. So you write historical fiction. What drew you to that genre?
Well, my first 3 novels were historical fiction. And what I've always dug it. I've always been a history nerd. What happened was I I went through a period where I was reading all these first person explorer kind of novels about the search for the Nile and all that good stuff. And I found this character who I was absolutely fascinated by, this real life archaeologist named Byron de Prorock, who in the 20s was the most famous archaeologist in the world for about 20 minutes, and then everything imploded. And he was kind of I excuse me. I was so fascinated by this character. And ultimately, when I decided I needed to write a novel, his story was the one that I was living with the most. And so I wrote his story.
Wow. And then you moved on to urban fantasy after that.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wrote Count of the Sahara, which is set in the 20s. And then I wrote Acra's Bastard and Acra's Orphans, which were set in the Crusades. And then just as I started getting known a little bit for writing historical fiction, my brain went, no, we're going to do this over here.
Right.
And I was, part of me was trying to be a mature grown-up and say, first of all, at this stage of your life, do you really want to be writing about werewolf detectives? But the other thing was, I was like, well, I have a brand, darn it. And then I went, what am I going to annoy both my readers? I mean, it's not like I had this massive contract and this giant following of people that were going to go all misery on me, right? and so I had this bug about a werewolf detective, and it came from a bunch of different portions of my brain. But I thought the idea was really fun. And so Johnny Lycan and the Anubis Disc came out a couple years ago. And then this year, Johnny Lycan and the Vegas Berserker.
Yeah, no, I love urban fantasy myself, because it's nice that you have like our world that everyone knows and understands, and then you just like that hidden glimpse of another world beneath our world is like really fascinating to me.
It sounds like your love of history came through as well with Johnny Lycan.
Well, here's the thing about urban fantasy is like I'd written this book that took place in the 20s, and then this book that took place in 1189, and there's not a lot of room for a good fart joke in there. I know I needed to write something more modern. And urban fantasy is great because you're allowed to show the world as it is, and then underneath there's this weirdness going on, and that was really fun. And what I like about Johnny is in the first book, even though he's a werewolf, he's convinced he's the weirdest thing out there. Like he believes the world is exactly what he believes the world to be, right? That he's the only weird thing out there. And as the stories unfold, he finds out that it ain't true. And that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. It kind of reminds me of that Shel Silverstein poem where the one person has the blue face and they search the world looking for someone like them, but they wear a mask. And so they pass another person with a blue face who's also wearing a mask, and they never know that they're the same because they're hiding their true self. And so, I don't know, just right.
Yeah, I love it. And it also gives me a chance to do stuff like the first Johnny book is very Chicago, and I had been living in Chicago before coming to Vegas. It was very Chicago, and I got to write about Chicago, and somebody said they could smell the brats and old style, that it felt like that. And then in the second book, I got to kind of trash Vegas a little bit because Johnny is one of these Midwestern boys who comes to Vegas and isn't particularly impressed. And so it's a lot of fun. Even though I love it here, I get it.
Right.
It's important to be able to laugh at yourself and show the good and the bad of
where you are.
Yeah, and this town is plenty of both.
Oh yeah. So tell us a little bit about your writing process. What does it look to get you from idea to draft?
You know, I get asked this question and I hate it because it assumes I have a process. And the reason people ask this is I know somewhere somebody is going, "Oh, I could do." No, you can't do my process because it's a car wreck. Um, what happens is I work all day during the day, and what happens with my fiction is I write it the same way I used to do my homework when I was in high school. I had a job starting from about 10th grade. And so I had to keep my grades up in order to keep the job. So what I would do is while I was cooking chicken and washing big pots, I would do my homework in my head so that when I got home, I just kind of emptied my head and spilled it out onto the page and it was already written. I just kind of transcribed it. And I write the same way. I daydream and I walk the dog and I have a cigar in the backyard and I do whatever I do. And it kind of percolates until generally the weekends. Uh, I sit down for 2-3 hours and just empty all the stuff that has been brewing all week onto the page. And so my first drafts are generally pretty solid because I've written and edited and tweaked and done all that stuff so that by the time I sit down, generally, it's pretty coherent for a first draft. But that's my process is just all week. There's just all this stuff. And, I am a big believer in giant notebooks. This is,
Yes.
Giant notebooks and scribbling ideas as we go. So it's not so much a process as it is something happens.
I'm really excited because I was like, Julia, he's saying the thing. That's exactly my process. I'm a homeschooling mom before. I don't have a whole lot of time to sit down. So like, I'm just thinking about it all day. So when they go to bed, I sit down and it just pours out on the page. Or I have a little notebook where I'm writing down notes constantly and just, so.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that I'm not alone. The other thing, and this sounds so pretentious, I hate it because it sounds so incredibly artsy. I guess it's called lucid dreaming.
Oh, okay.
Like I'm a big believer in naps, and
absolutely,
I'll lay down the afternoon. I usually take half an hour in the afternoon. And while I'm lying there, my brain does strange things. And I will often wake up and have, the next scene ready to
wow.
go. And I'm not really asleep and I'm not really awake, but my brain processes it. And I know how weird and pretentious that sounds, but it
is not.
Got me here,
Yes. No, you've made a living off of your writing. I really respect that. That is not.
Well, sadly, the day job is supported by the nonfiction writing.
Yeah.
The check with the nonfiction writing occasionally has a comma in it. Trust me, it's a totally different thing. I look forward to the day that I can sit on my deck all week and just write fun stuff.
Yeah. It's absolutely an accomplishment that you have 15 books up, though. Like, congratulations on that, for sure.
I know that I tend to denigrate that, and then I stop and I go, "Shut up!" It's like a thing,
It counts.
It absolutely counts. And when you're writing, when you do anything, right? If you're a singer, if you're an actor, if you're whatever, and between my wife and I, we've been them all. You're going to do it. The nice thing about writing is you don't need a room full of people in order to do it.
Right.
I mean, you hope that your writing finds an audience, and you hope that people find you and like you, right? But somebody once said that writing a novel is like telling a joke and waiting a year for the laugh.
Right. It totally is. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a very different process.
Yes. I love those messages so much, where someone emails or texts or messages me and they're like, what happened? Is she alive? I'm like, yes, the end.
They got to
I
that point, yeah.
They reached
I
that
get
spot.
some of that. The coolest one was with Count of the Sahara. I got an email out of the blue about a little more than a year ago, from Byron's granddaughter,
Hmm.
who had read the book and
Mhm.
thanked me for telling Byron's story.
Mhm.
Oh, that's so amazing.
Which was,
Yeah.
whoa, it was my, first of all, it's
It's
not a
wild.
particularly pleasant story. So
Yeah.
I didn't know, how the
How
family
yeah.
would react to that. But the family had hidden the secret for so long that she was just glad that somebody had
Mm,
told the story.
Mhm.
right.
And that was like a real honor. That was very cool. So I love that. And I love reading reviews, even the bad ones.
Right.
I love when people respond uh, to your work. That's why we do this.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love too that you use the analogy of a joke because you write a lot of humor in your stories. So humor is not easy to do. As somebody who's tried to write humorous stories and it kind of was
I
it
have a
kind of failed.
suspicion.
Yeah.
I have a suspicion that you are not trying to write humor. You're trying to write comedy,
Okay.
and
Okay.
it's a very different thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'd love to
I
hear about
actually
it.
looked this up because I have all kinds of theories about comedy, and trust me, you don't have time or the right beverage in front of you to hear them all. But I actually looked up the difference between comedy and humor.
Mhm.
Okay.
Humor is funny things happen.
Mm,
Comedy is an attempt to make funny things happen and tell them in a funny way. And comedy is a structure,
Mhm.
right? Humor is funny stuff happens all the time.
gotcha. Okay.
I like
Okay,
that.
so
Yeah.
give you an example. In the first Johnny book, one of my favorite laughs is not a it's not a joke. It's Johnny has just, had the fight with the Russian bad guys, and he's trying to get out of the house, and he's all werewolfed up, and he's confronted with a doorknob.
Mm,
And he's got, hands the size of a ham and 7-inch nails. The
right.
doorknob is a big deal. Now, if I were writing comedy, there would be, a page and a half of all the wacky stuff that happens
Okay.
Mhm.
with him trying to get out of the room.
Right.
But just the humor of crap,
Mhm.
I'm gonna get out of here.
Right. Spoiled
I
by a
love that
doorknob.
it's so unexpected and it comes very naturally out of the action that
Mhm.
people chuckle at it, and I go, okay, good. Now he's gonna unwerewolf his hand and get the heck out of there.
Mhm. I love the unexpected humor that you get sometimes in books where you crank up the tense situation and then just bam, that joke hits, or
Right.
that funny thing hits you out of nowhere and everyone just like I
Allows
love
you to breathe in the middle of the tension. Yeah.
that.
And
Mhm.
that's the intention. I mean, one of the reasons I like writing Johnny, even though I am neither a 30-year-old guy nor am I a werewolf. Um, Johnny is basically an excuse for me to let out some of my
Mm.
snarkiness
Mhm.
Mhm.
in a way
Right.
that is legitimate.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so writing Johnny is a lot of fun.
Yes.
Um,
It's nice to have that outlet where you can take a piece of yourself and put it in a
Mhm.
book and let it grow.
yeah, now it's funny because my writing critique friends often have to stop me and go, no, that was you. That wasn't Johnny. That was you. Right? I mean, it's a couple
Yeah.
of things.
Right.
I'm Canadian by birth, so I say things very often that a kid in Chicago wouldn't say.
Right.
I am a
Mhm.
crusty old man, so I don't talk like a 30-year-old. Right? So they need to keep me honest on that, but the core kind of, I am terrified that my dying words are going to be, really, that
Right.
I'm going to go in some stupid way. And
Right,
that
right.
sense of humor is what Johnny has. So he can face, a 350-pound bloodthirsty berserker and see the joke in it.
Yeah, no, I love that. We talk a lot about how like writing is therapeutic because like we do get to channel, like you said, those snarkier sides that like maybe would be a little toxic to be in person, but we can have fun with it through our writing and kind of vent that.
Exactly. Venting is a beautiful, beautiful thing.
I know, right? It does save us from some social faux pas, I'm sure.
And I have killed people on paper that I am not allowed to do that to in real life. So
Right, right.
Yes.
Truly a benefit. Do you have any tips for finding humor then in writing for somebody who is like attempting to write?
yeah, like I say, humor generally comes out of the situation. So, it's things like the doorknob,
Hmm.
the werewolf hand. It's if you are open to the lunacy in the world, it comes fairly natural. What most of us do though is edit that out.
Right.
We see something funny and weird, and then we go, "Oh yeah, but I'm not writing a comedy, so I can't do that, right? I've got to get her spell exactly right." Um, there's nothing funnier than somebody really self-important just really screwing things up.
Right.
And we all screw up all the time. You just can't be afraid to write that stuff. And that's what it is. It's being open because a lot of times we'll think of silly things in the middle of that situation. Your heroine. I write werewolf stuff, but I don't write shifter novels, right? There's a
Yeah.
whole genre
That's a whole
Right.
different thing.
of shifter novels. And what makes me, if you ever look at the cover of those novels, they're all these incredibly buff six-pack guys, all oiled up, not a hair on their body.
Right.
These guys turn into wolves. What do they wax 20 days a month? Right? That kind of stuff. If you're open to it and you allow yourself to see it, there's lots of stuff, and it's not all hysterically funny, ha ha ha.
Right.
But it'll give you a chuckle. And if you don't do it there, you can certainly do it in the dialogue.
Which was another of your strengths, I believe, that you feel that you do very. I cannot talk tonight.
Well, that was a very weird thing. Please tell me the things that you do really well.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I don't know. I don't use autocorrect a lot. I spell okay.
Right.
But I think dialogue, if I look at the feedback that I get from readers, I think dialogue is something that I spend a lot of time on. And I believe that it's one of the things that I do well. And I think that goes all the way back to my stand-up days and then writing scripts and having to think in terms of dialogue and action. And so dialogue is so much fun. Action scenes are fun. Dialogue is a lot of fun. It's the bridge scenes where you're going between scenes, or you need to get, you need 3 pages to get from here to here without boring everybody to tears. That makes me crazy.
Right.
But dialogue is something that you can practice. I am a terminal serial eavesdropper.
Yes.
I love, like, when I go out on a walk or I go into a coffee shop, I don't wear earbuds. I very rarely wear earphones or listen to music when I'm walking or whatever. I think partly because, I can put the go away and don't bother me face on and people
People pay attention. Yeah.
People pay attention. Not that there's a lot of people bothering cranky old cishet white guys anyway. We're generally ignored, and thank goodness. But I can't help myself. I listen to conversations and I hear the most amazing things.
Right.
And if you listen and you get the rhythm, and you, as you're writing, you try to capture. One of the mistakes that people make when they're writing dialogue is they try to write it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't talk correctly.
No, we don't.
They use bad grammar, and they use the wrong word, and they occasionally cuss, and they pause inconveniently. And
Right.
you know, those are the things that make dialogue realistic.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've really worked on your characters, you should have a sense of how they speak.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That's true.
And then it's just a matter of putting it on the page, which is where the writing and the practice and all that stuff comes in.
Yeah. So, how do you balance, like, especially coming from like a screenplay background, filling in what's happening around the talking?
You know, a dialogue scene has three components. There's what they say to each other. There's what happened before the scene started, and there's what happens after the scene is over. So you're coming from, you know, everybody involved in the dialogue is coming from somewhere, and they're having the scene, and then they're going to somewhere else. So the idea is to drive the story, right? To drive the action. And if all you're doing is exposition, I call that the "as you know, Bob."
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That real on the nose dialogue.
The on the nose dialogue that you have to do some of that because you're giving your main character information they didn't have before.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or you're trying to help your reader. When you're doing a series, this is always a battle, is how much information do you have to fill on people who maybe are joining in book 2 or 3.
Right.
So that they're not lost. But if you think about where are these people coming from, right? Why are they meeting right now? What has to happen in that scene, and where is it going? It's a little bit easier to get away from that purely functional stuff because there's a scene going. Where are they meeting? They're in the car. Okay, what do you do when you're talking to somebody in the car? You're drumming your fingers on the steering wheel. You're shooting a dirty look at the light going, God, are you ever going to change? You know, you're uncomfortable, so you look out the window trying to avoid the person who you're looking at. Maybe they are kind of fidgeting, and they, you know, so they're drumming their fingers on their knees because they want to say something and don't know how to do it. If you really think about what were they doing before they got in the car and what's going to happen after this conversation, you find out one person is really ticked off, one person is nervous. Well, when you're nervous, you act a certain way. I try not to let 4 or more lines of dialogue go without some blocking.
Okay.
Without something, and I try to avoid. You can't always, you know. Stephen King says they said is good enough, right? That your words should tell you whether they're sighing or laughing or whatever they're doing.
Yes.
I think, you know, you're allowed some of those kinds of words. That's ridiculous, but the point is pretty well made.
Yes. People have very strong opinions about dialogue tags.
Oh, people have strong opinions about everything. You know what I have a strong opinion about? They can bite me. It's not true. Right. I actually care passionately about what people say, and a lot of them are smarter and better writers than me, so I try to learn from it. I also know that there is no such thing as a hard and fast rule.
Absolutely. Right. Yes. Right. 3 rules to writing and no one knows what they are.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right,
I mean,
right.
there are things that make perfect sense, right? You try to avoid, because what happens is you can tell when the writer has been sitting there with their thesaurus trying to come up with another word. He queried. No, he didn't. He just asked it. Come on.
Right, right.
You gotta save those big words for when it absolutely fits the situation.
Absolutely.
Not
And the
just
thing about
because you.
dialogue is you want to go with the dialogue. You want to hear those voices in your head. You don't want to be caught up in the writing.
Absolutely, right. We want to kind of gloss over the author.
But the other thing about that, and this just occurred to me, so if it's not as brilliant as I think it is, tell me to shut up. If you use very simple dialogue tags, then the dialogue has to do the work.
Right.
That makes perfect sense to me.
If you go crazy with the queried and asked and all that kind of stuff, then it's just sentences, and the only thing that changes is a period or a question mark. And I think when people ask questions, there's direct questions, there's roundabout questions, there's I don't really want to ask this, so I have to think about it kind of questions.
Right.
And that's all the blocking and the stuff around it.
It's almost an art form to capture someone's voice, to capture the way that they're saying it in a way that the reader can hear it in their head.
Yeah, I mean, art form, craft, call it what you want, right? I'm always reluctant to call what I do art because read it. But I think that's what it is, right? When you do that well, people can hear it. Most of what I write is in first person, and Johnny is written in first person, and the cruelest comment and the nicest compliment people have given me is the same thing. It's like, it was like you were in my head. I could hear you. And, depending on whether you like what you heard, that's either a or a terrible thing to say to anybody.
What is your favorite part to writing?
I love that moment when you get something on the page and you look at it and go, yeah.
Oh, that's a good one.
I remember I wrote Acra's Orphans. I killed off a character who may or may not have been human. I'm trying not to give massive spoiler.
Yeah.
Right.
There was a horse that he got in the first book that was a pain in his butt. And the horse dies in the second book. And as I was writing it, I could already hear the screams of outrage.
Right.
I knew exactly what was going to happen. And I know because when the book came out, my cousin sent me an email, and the only line in the email was, "You killed Droopy, you bastard." And when you write, and I knew that people were going to have that response, and I could hardly wait. But then, I'm a terrible human being, objectively.
No,
that's a big consideration when you're writing, is being careful who you kill or don't kill. I had another writer friend who was going to kill the dog in her story. And I'm like, you cannot do it. Do not do this. And she took it to her other writing group, and they're like, you may not kill the dog. Like, there's a whole website devoted to whether or not a show or an author kills the dog. You cannot do this. So she didn't kill the dog because she got really scared. But
I as somebody who may or may not have actually killed a dog in a book, it has to serve the desired purpose.
It has to serve the story.
Right? Sure. If you don't kill the dog, John Wick is a crazy old guy with a basement full of Krugerrands.
For sure.
If you kill the dog, he becomes John Wick.
That's true. That's true. Your characters need a motivation there.
Yes.
That's a wonderful favorite part of writing. I love that
Yes.
when I look at the screen and go, "This is actually kind of good." Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I have made myself laugh.
Hmm.
There's a scene in the new Johnny book that I am halfway through. Um, and I knew when I wrote it, I went, this is going to freak people out. And I took it to my writers group, and it had exactly the response I hoped it would have.
Mm.
That's very
And
satisfying.
I was
Yeah.
like, yes, this is why we do this, ladies and gentlemen.
Right.
So, do you have a least favorite part of writing?
Editing.
Yes.
Ah!
Editing. And the reason is no matter how hard I try, I don't mind rewriting.
Mhm.
Right.
Right? There's a giant plot hole here and I have to fix this. But
Mhm.
it's things like I'm on book 3. I forgot the name of one of the characters. I was halfway through the opening of the book and I realized I had given the character the wrong name. Right? What I need is the same thing I need in my day job business life, which is I need not so much an editor as a remora. You know what a remora is? If you ever watch nature documentaries on Shark Week, the shark is swimming through the water, and the remoras are these little fish that swim alongside. And as the shark tears stuff up, and they clean up all the little bits.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I need. I need a remora. I need a literary remora who can follow me around and goes, "No, Wayne, the engine in the Charger is actually a 385.
Ah,
You wrote that in book 1."
Hmm.
Right? That's what
Right.
that's
Right.
what I hate is all the details and all the little things. And how many times have I said that exact same way?
Oh,
Mhm.
yes.
Somebody to catch that stuff, especially, we're in the indie book world. I have occasionally paid for editors to do my stuff, but I try to use pro writing and I use my beta readers and I use my critique group. And at the end of the day, there's nothing beats somebody who knows what the heck they're doing.
Right. I
I
I had to
completely agree.
giggle when you first said that because I am an editor as well as an author. So that just like I always anticipate that kind of being most writers' least favorite part of writing, because
Yeah,
it can be tedious. Yeah.
yeah, it's not the rewriting and it's not the
Mhm.
going through and going, oh, what was I thinking? And it's just the little detail, because those little
Right.
details are what separate good writing from
Mhm.
lousy writing.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I reviewed a book recently, and I won't say where because I don't want to give this away. And the whole premise of the site is a lot of times these are first time authors and they need those first reviews. So be kind,
Right.
right? And there was a lot to not be kind about,
Right. Right.
but I was trying. And the problem with the book is that the plot made perfect sense, A to
Mm-hmm.
B. The characters, they had the right characters behaving in the right way. It was just dull as dishwater. The dialogue was all servicing the plot. You couldn't
Mm-hmm.
tell one character from another from the
Mm-hmm.
lines of dialogue. Was it competently written? Yes. Would an editor have said, yeah, okay?
Yeah.
Right. Right.
But it was boring and uninteresting and
That's my
Right.
complaint with a lot of movies that come out. You watch them and
Mm-hmm.
they're beautiful and they're well done and the actors are giving it all, but the story just lacks soul. There's no spirit
Right.
to it. There's nothing there. It's
It's
empty.
just aesthetic, right? It's about a look
Yeah.
or a vibe or a
Um,
feeling, and it
yeah,
doesn't
although
have that
they're
that's
checking
substance.
off the boxes, but there's no soul to it.
well,
Mm.
that's yeah, and um, it's like all art. Like my wife and I just saw the movie Tar with Kate Blanchett.
Haven't-
It is a brilliant piece of acting. It is a horrible, soulless movie. I hated it. I
Oh,
hated
no,
the
yeah.
movie. I mean, it's fine to hate the character because that's part of the deal.
Right.
But she is brilliant in it.
Mhm.
It is objectively a perfectly competent, good piece of work, and I hated it.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Part of that is that just you're not the right audience, and I try to keep that in mind with my own writing of not everyone is going to love this book because it's
Right.
not for everyone.
Well, and that's
But some are a little harder to love than others, for sure.
well. But the thing is that all I mean, there are a bunch of ways to look at a piece of artwork,
Mm-hmm.
whatever,
Mhm.
right? One is it competently made? Right? Can you
Yeah.
see the zipper in the gorilla suit?
Right.
Right? Is it a competently made piece of whatever it's supposed to be? And that's the first thing. And that's a very low bar.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, okay, it's competent. Now, is it something I want to read? Is this a story I want to hear?
Right.
You know, when I look at my reviews, and thankfully from my performing days, I've been getting reviewed since I was 18 years old, and it wasn't always kind. So I've
Mhm.
developed a pretty thick skin. But when I look at reviews of my writing, almost always, if I get a bad review, it's somebody, the book is different than they thought it was going to be, and so they were disappointed,
Mm-hmm.
or it was too much of something. And I like, it was too irreverent, it was too violent,
Oh,
it
yeah, yeah.
was
Mhm.
too this or that. Those are the reviews I like, when people tell you why they didn't like the book,
Mm-hmm.
because one person's trigger warning is another person's advertisement.
Mhm. Right.
Absolutely.
Like, I've read books, or I've read reviews where they said this is violent and awful, and I couldn't sleep after reading it. And I was like, take my money,
Right.
right?
Yes, absolutely.
Whereas like cozy mysteries are they're hard to write, and
Mhm.
they can be wonderful, and they're charming, and Jessica Fletcher is adorable and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I can only get so excited,
Right. Right.
right? So when you pick up a book, it may or may not speak to you. Now, if
Mhm.
it's just incompetently done, badly edited, badly written, you can see the gorilla suit, the zipper in the gorilla suit, that just annoys me.
Right.
But once you get past that, then it's, do I like the characters? Did I like the
Mhm.
story? I just finished
Mhm.
a book, historical fiction book, and I've read easily half a dozen of this author's stuff and loved it. And this last one, I barely finished. And, I needed a Sherpa and a mule team to help get me to the end of the book.
Right.
And I like this author, and I like the
Mhm.
subject matter, I thought. And,
Right.
Sometimes
Right.
this falls a little bit flat there. Yeah. And then I also feel like sometimes you can forgive seeing that zipper in the gorilla
Right.
suit if the story is
Right.
good enough. If the
if the
story is
story's good
weird,
enough,
you can
if
forgive a
it's
lot.
funny, yeah,
Yeah.
if it's amusing, if you know going in that you're going to see the zipper in the gorilla suit.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
If I go and see Peter Jackson's King Kong and I see a zipper in the gorilla suit, I'm going to be really angry. If I watch
Right.
Plan
Not the
9 from
ticket you
Outer
paid for.
Space, I'm sitting there with my popcorn and my
Right.
beer,
Right.
and it's all part of the show.
Sounds like you're managing
Absolutely.
expectations at this point. Yeah. With your
Life
reviews.
is managing expectations.
Right. Right.
The Buddha said that the reason for unhappiness is high expectations. If you expect nothing, you cannot be disappointed or sad.
Mhm.
And yet I still
When was the last time somebody quoted Buddha to you on this show? I ask you.
Oh, I think you're the first.
You're the first.
We love it.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're a fairly new show, so you're definitely the first.
Yeah.
See, again, low expectations, low bar.
Right, right. Do you have writing advice that you like, that you would share?
Something that you would tell a new author.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's easy to fall back on write drunk, edit sober, which just sounds cool and Hemingway-ish, but it's terrible advice. Um, but it does sound cool. And, if you're an old white guy, you're supposed to aspire to Hemingway, right?
Right.
I mean, maybe.
I don't know. My thing with writers is that I tell them that they have to get feedback. You can't sit in your basement and crank out words and know whether it's any good.
Right.
Um, as a stand up, I could write jokes, but I didn't know if a joke was funny or if it was going to work unless I did it in front of a live audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I encourage writers, even if they're very new, especially if they're very new, to find a critique group. And
Mhm.
if you can do it in person, that's preferable.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is a social aspect, and there's always the meeting after the meeting, and you sit there afterwards and somebody goes off on you for something you've written. That's very valuable.
Right.
um, but there are online groups and Facebook groups and meetups and all kinds of stuff,
Mhm.
and some of them are separated by genre and some of them are separated by experience level. But and find a group that you can fit into. The sweet spot is don't be the best writer in the group, but don't be the worst.
Right, right. I think that's valuable
Mm-hmm.
advice because that's one of the perks of going to school for writing is that you get that workshop environment in
Yeah.
class.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of it teaches you how to take feedback as well.
Yeah. And you're probably not going to find it the first time. When I moved here to Vegas, I joined a group, and it was wonderful. And for years until COVID drove us online,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
but I've realized over the last little while, and this is just part of the evolution of someone as a writer, most of the people in the group are unpublished. They
Mhm.
write stuff that I am I really prepared to critique somebody's memoir or their screenplay or whatever. And I'm a firm believer that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Right.
And so I've kind of reached a stage where I need to find a different writers group
Mm-hmm.
where people have more experience. They're a little more willing to tell me when something is crap,
Mm-hmm.
Right, right.
you know?
Yeah.
So I'm in the process of making that shift myself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But
What
I
I have
think you
found,
need,
sorry.
no,
What
Kirsty,
I
go
have
ahead.
found with my various author friends is that they all have different strengths. So I can present
Mhm.
the same manuscript for them, and they're going to pick up on different things than the next person is. So I show it to all of them and pull what their strength is.
Right.
So
Yeah,
that's a lot
and
of good
I
advice.
love, for example, one of the things I really love. I mean, I'm not really prepared to critique somebody's memoir because you get
Mhm.
into somebody's life, and how do you tell them their life sucks?
Mhm.
Uh, but generally speaking, I like a group where it's cross genre,
Yes.
Mhm. Right.
Yes.
Right.
right? Because I have learned, you know, rom-coms, romance isn't my thing, but I write better scenes,
Right.
having seen what works and what doesn't
Mhm.
in
Right.
this genre. I
Absolutely.
don't write high-tech sci-fi, but there's something about the world building and there's something about those things
Mhm.
that work, and I can steal from that.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I always say read widely because you can learn developing
Oh,
relationships from romance. You can use world building, character development, all that stuff from different
absolutely.
genres. Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And so I like a writers group that is not genre specific.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
Like Horror Writers of America has a chapter here in Vegas, and they have a critique group, and it's all horror, which is great, right?
Mhm.
But there's a lot of that's not scary enough. That's not gross enough.
Right.
No, that's too Lovecraftian. It needs to be more like this. And everybody's kind of breathing their own exhaust on the
Mm-hmm.
subject. And these groups tend to take on a character of, they all like the same authors. And so if
Mhm.
it doesn't match up with that,
Yes.
Right.
If you
right?
keep
And
your audience too narrow, if you
yeah,
keep your critique group too narrow, you're writing for a very niche sort of group,
and
reader.
it's the same thing as back in my stand-up days. There were guys who would tell a joke just to crack up the comics in the back,
Right.
but the
Right.
audience didn't think they were funny at all.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of like
Or they
being in
would
a
say
bubble.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime you're in a bubble, and
Right.
this is part of the problem with the world is we're all in our little bubbles, and I get my news from here, and I don't listen to
Mm.
people from this, and
Right.
Mhm.
the world is too short for that foolishness.
Echo chamber.
Right.
How about the echo
Yes.
chamber?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, do you have, where do you find your inspiration?
Oh, good Lord. You try walking around with this brain and see what happens.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. I just find inspiration everywhere, especially for my short stories. I literally have written short stories based on stuff I heard while walking the dog.
Mhm.
Mm.
If you're open to, I live in Las Vegas.
Right.
If you sit in a bar, or better yet, if you sit in Harry Reid Airport for an hour and just watch the humans going by, and you can't come up with an idea,
Right.
maybe take up watercolors.
Right. Right.
Because the stories are everywhere. It's insane.
Yeah. People watching can be a great source of inspiration.
When I was younger and single and feared I would always be that way,
Mm-hmm.
I would be like in a pub or something, and I'd be watching people as I drank, and I did what I called playing Wild Kingdom,
Mm.
where I'm imagining the scenarios of all the people who are in the bar.
Mm-hmm.
The young lion goes to the gazelle. Oh, the gazelle has gored him in the gut, and he goes back.
Oh,
I'm just
right. It's like the
imagining
narrator on a nature
Right.
show.
Richard
Right.
Attenborough on Nature, right?
Yes.
Right.
Um, if you do that and just invent stories, my wife and I are terrible because she is as much an eavesdropper as I am, and we have invented entire roomfuls of scenarios.
Right.
Right? Our favorite is spotting the dates that are going badly.
Right. Right.
That is just immense fun, and it's complete hubris, and we should be struck by lightning. But
Oh,
You gotta find your joy where you can find it.
right. Small pleasures in life, right?
exactly,
So this is kind of a fun question to ask, but do you think writer's block is legitimately a thing, and how do you deal with it?
I wish you. I saw that question on the prep sheet, and I considered lying my butt off.
Right.
I am in the middle. I am in the middle of a chapter. Normally, I can bang out like 2,000 words in an afternoon because it's
Mhm.
been noodling and all that stuff. I have been staring at the same 300 words for 10 days.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that all I got to do is finish this chapter, and it's a very simple bridge chapter. And once that's done, I know exactly how the next 5 chapters go.
Mhm.
But it kills me. And I think that writer's block is real.
Mhm.
Um, it is seldom fatal.
Right.
And there are a bunch of ways. I mean, I've actually taught creative thinking in businesses. There are a bunch of ways that you can break through it. You can just simply walk away and write something else.
Mm-hmm.
You can just sit there and force yourself, I'm going to do the next 150 pages. There are a bunch of things that you can do. And, I have a day job that requires stuff. If I did nothing but write this book, I'm sure I would, through brute force, plow my way through this silly chapter. There's a day job and real life and things.
Right.
You got
Right.
4 kids. Lord help you.
Thank you.
Mine is 29 and in Chicago, and still consumes way more of my bandwidth than she should. So yeah, it's absolutely real, but it's not fatal, and you do have to work at getting over it. Is the thing. And you can brainstorm. I mean, I know what's going to happen is if I don't do it in the next day or two, is I'm just going to go somewhere. The weather's kind of lousy right now, or I do it on the deck. That's the reason I moved to Las Vegas is, 340 days a year you can sit on the deck.
Right.
But, just sit there with my notebook and just start mind mapping and word associating. And I know I'll break through it. And the thing is, once you do, it's like this dam of built up stuff. Once you break through it, and the answer is usually really simple. Boom, you just ride the wave for the next 5 chapters. But it's real. I can't claim that it isn't. I mean, I look at people who, especially indie authors, who crank out 2-3 books a year and get them and publish them and put them out. Like, they don't just write them, but they actually get them out in the world. And I just stand in awe.
Yeah. Some people are very prolific.
That's me. Like, I'm attempting to put out 2 books this year. So
salute.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Some people are very prolific, and it astounds me as well.
Well, the other thing is I'm alternating. Like, Johnny Lycan came out in December. Well, February 28th, my new business book comes out.
Right.
So it's not like I'm not doing nothing.
No.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I feel like we all write at our own pace. We all release at our own pace, and there's nothing wrong with how anyone does it. Absolutely.
Yep. Some people like to publish like the big giant brick books. Those take time for sure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to give you the opportunity to tell us like where we can find you, where we can learn about your books and all of that. So where can we find you online?
I don't know. I'm so shy and retiring and so hate doing self-promotion. Yeah. I am not hard to find. My Twitter handle is actually, where is it? Here.
Yes.
I love interacting with people on Twitter. WayneTurmel.com is my website. You can go on Amazon, type in Wayne Turmel, and you can see all the foolishness that I have created, both my business books and whatever. And I'm on Facebook, Wayne Turmel Author. And if that doesn't help you find me, you're not trying very hard.
I love that approach. It was absolutely fabulous having you on. If you want to say the magic words, Kirsha?
Yes. Thank you for listening, and join us next time for our next guest. And remember, there's always more than one way up a mountain. To be on our show, find us on social media at The Tell Not Show or email us at thetellnotshow@gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. It was wonderful to meet you, Wayne. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening. If you enjoyed the show, consider subscribing and liking. We appreciate all the support. Julia J.K. Allen is an author, editor, and coach, and can be found at hijinksrudder.com.
Kirsha Fox is an author, avid reader, gamer, and mother to 4, and you can find her at kirshafox.com. Thanks, and see you next time.